Hey there guys, I am Rabbit, and before we go ahead and get into anything, I do want to apologize. I am struggling a little bit with a mild flu or cold. I swear, half of my vlogs or live videos, I'm sick with something. Doesn't it seem that way? Anyway, this video won't actually be too long because as opposed to making this more of like an informative type video where I kind of vomit my opinions and everything to you, I was wanting this to be more conversational because I'm really curious about something and I would love your feedback, thoughts, and opinions. So it has been a couple of weeks since my top 15 women in retro video games went up. That video was something that was very important to me, and we only, and by we I mean myself and Super Nintendo Girl, touched upon just 15 of so many phenomenal women that really left an impact on us throughout our youth when we were playing through these games, and even now maybe playing some of them for the very first time or replaying them. I just really felt compelled to release a video that highlighted some of the good about women in video games because there just seems to be so much banter everywhere about how women aren't presented as they should be and about how there's just a limited number of actual reputable female characters out there. I really enjoy having this sort of dialogue where we talk about characters and like what makes a good character, what makes a bad character, but ever since releasing that video, I have had so many private messages and comments on that video in particular where you guys loved the list, you felt like S&G and I really did highlight some wonderful characters and we explained why they were great and they're women, you know, so it's not like they're all just sex toys and, you know, they're not just modern video games. So I think one of the big arguments a lot of people always puts out there is that, well, developers are trying now to make great female characters, but it always wasn't that way. And kind of the whole point of that top 15 video and future videos that I will produce either by myself with S&G or just in the future with other collaborators, I really want to show that, you know what, just because you haven't heard of some of these women from retro games doesn't mean that they don't exist. There are literally I can lists, and if I go back to the one that I originally drafted, I have very close to 100 women from retro video games that I think are worth mentioning or worth being praised because the developers did do a very good job with their design, with their characterization, with their relevance to the plot, and their just position in the entire journey that you embark on throughout the game itself. What's interesting to me is even though many of you actually did enjoy that video and you liked the girls that S&G and I highlighted, one of the top complaints that we have gotten, or that I anyway have received privately, is that a lot of you feel like Zelda, even if we were praising her chic alter ego specifically, you think that she isn't worth being like a top anything for a female character because you consider her to be a damsel in distress. So I kind of have two positions on what that's for, right? I have two positions on this entire thing, and then I want to turn it over to you guys because I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts and feedback on this. So the first thing that I do want to say is that I've never considered Zelda to be a damsel in distress, or at least not the stereotypical one that we often see or that we often hear about, because in my mind, the way that we've often had Zeldas presented, and I guess as an aside, let me start off by pointing out that Zelda is a very interesting character in the Legend of Zelda games because in my opinion, Link is pretty stagnant, right? Like, his personality is pretty much the same. He accomplishes pretty much the same things across all the different games in the franchise. Like, there's not that much variation to who Link is, with the exception of maybe like his background story and his starting village. But everything else is pretty much consistent throughout the games. The same cannot be said for Zelda. I will say that I have not played all of the Legend of Zelda games. I have primarily played the 3D ones, so just to list them right here for you, I've played Ocarina of Time to completion, I've played Majora's Mask, I have played Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and I feel like there's one more that I'm missing that I played on a handheld, but I can't remember what it was and I didn't finish it anyway, so maybe I should only count those 4. The point of me saying this is just to acknowledge that, you know what, my pool of Zelda games is not as broad as maybe some of yours happens to be, so it is possible that, you know what, I don't know as much about Zelda as I should. However, I do feel like I've gotten enough glimpses of her to feel like, at least in the stories that I've had the pleasure to partake in, she was never necessarily presented as a damsel in distress. So this kind of comes back to what I was just saying a moment ago about how Link is pretty much the same across all of the games. And Again, I acknowledge I haven't played all of them, so maybe he is radically different in one or two, but let's just go with what I have played and like what I have been exposed to. He has been the same. Zelda, on the other hand, always has a very different like backstory, or her manifestation in the certain games. It's just a little bit different. So let's just focus on 3 iterations of her, just so that this isn't a super long video. So the first one is who she is in Ocarina of Time and her alter ego as Sheik. The second one would be who she is in Wind Waker and her alter ego as Tetra. And then in Twilight Princess, even though she didn't necessarily have an alter ego, we saw her in what I perceive to be somewhat of a different light than how she was presented in those 2 aforementioned titles. Now, in all of these games, in my opinion and in my mind, and from what I recall, Zelda was never really a damsel in distress. Each of her forms and each of her, I guess, iterations across these 3 games had some sort of component to it that was very active, and that really did allow her to participate in the events of the game, even if we, as the gamer and as the player, didn't actually partake in it ourselves. So let's actually start with Ocarina of Time's Zelda / Sheik. So when you see this manifestation of her and how she kind of, like hid herself and disguised herself as a Sheikah, and she was so involved, and honestly, in my opinion, she was the reason that Link was able to be successful in the long run anyway, so I don't see how anyone can say Zelda in her form in that game was a damsel in distress, because yes, I guess technically she wasn't the active hero herself, but she still was a main catalyst in the events unfolding, as well as the actual conclusion being reached, and there being peace brought back to the land, etc., and Link doing what he needed to do. When you look at Wind Waker, I feel very much the same way, except I think that they did an even better job when it came to presenting what her alter form was. So when you look at Tetra and you think about how, wow, she's this spirited, feisty pirate captain. Keep that in mind, you guys. She wasn't just like a pirate that was working with like a band of merry thieves. She was the captain, so she led all of these pirates. So in and of itself, like right there, you can tell, wow, she's a bit of a prankster. She's involved in so many of the goings-ons in this world that are negative, or I shouldn't say negative, but that may not have been the most positive. But she was a very active person, and she wasn't just sitting idly by and letting a bunch of things unfold. Like, she was a major participant in events that took place in the world of where the Wind Waker game unfolded. And lastly, when I think about Twilight Princess and I think about Zelda, this is the one where I see a lot of people saying, well, look, Zelda didn't really do anything and she didn't accomplish anything in this game. She was captured for the entirety of it. I feel like when people are referring to damsels in distress, they're usually referring to like a girl or a woman or whatever that just sits idly on the sidelines, doesn't help anyone, she's captured, and then needs to wait for someone else to save her, and like that's the extent of her contribution to the plot and to the development of the other characters. And Zelda was not like that in Twilight Princess. If you even go back to what led up to her capture in the first place, she was leading an army against, what was the adversary's name in that game? I think it was Zant, and the reason why she ended up getting captured was because, in a sense, she surrendered because she realized that her army and her people couldn't withstand what was coming from the enemy. Like, they were just too powerful. So that alone to me says that Zelda wasn't a damsel in distress. She was leading a fucking army. She was an active participant in that battle, in all of the events that led up to her capture. She wasn't just sitting by like a stream braiding her hair and someone came and snatched her away. She was commanding an army. That's fucking cool. I don't know, I guess in my mind when I think about these 3 characters, when I think about those 3 games in particular and how she was presented, I don't see that as being a damsel in distress. The only thing, and this is kind of like the part 2, I guess, of what I was mentioning earlier, how I have 2 major things that I want to say. One being, I never perceived her to be a damsel in distress, and those 3 games I think are great examples of why and how her character actually has great meaning and does hold a lot of power and strength. And then the second thing that I wanted to point out is I feel like if you want to criticize anything about the games, it's not that Zelda isn't a good character. I think if anything, the criticism that some of you who think she's a damsel in distress actually have is that the developers or the storyboard team or whoever you want to point fingers at they didn't do a good job of allowing us as the player to be an active participant in all of the events revolving around Zelda herself. So looking at Twilight Princess in particular, we weren't a part of her battle with Zant. We weren't a part of her getting captured or her, commanding this army, her training up this army, her leading this army. Like, we just hear about these great things that she does. Same thing with Tetra in Wind Waker. We meet her and she wasn't really like a villain, and I wouldn't even call her an anti-hero when we are first introduced to her and have to deal with her bullshit. But at the same time, she wasn't really a comrade when you initially have to interact with her. So it's one of those things where, you play as Link in all of these games, and so Zelda, no matter how great of a backstory she has, no matter how involved she is in the events as they are explained to us or as they are revealed to us as the gamer, she still is involved. It's just that we don't get to be a part of her involvement. We don't get to see it. We don't get to play it. We just hear about it, right? I think that's a valid criticism, that instead of Nintendo thinking about having like alter gendered egos for these different characters, so like Link versus Linkle, or I know the rumor has sort of circulated that for this upcoming Wii U Zelda game, Link will also have like a Link girl form. I don't know if it's going to be Linkle or if it's going to just be Link and he'll just be a girl. I don't know, and I don't even know if those rumors are true, but let's assume that they are. I do think that that's kind of strange, because I think rather than trying to introduce more female characters into these worlds, I think what would be better is allowing us as the player to experience the depth that already exists with characters that have been a part of the franchise for a while already. Zelda's probably the main one, I think, where I would personally be disappointed if in this upcoming game we did have it as Link or Linkle as, your two starters, instead of it being something like Link versus Zelda. And even if they had to start in different ways, like Zelda starts in a castle and Link starts in a little shitty town, I don't care. But I do feel like, and I can agree with those of you who do feel this way and are frustrated by people praising Zelda as a character, I will acknowledge, and you know what, I concede on that argument that we haven't had the opportunity to really experience Zelda and everything that she has to offer. But that is not the same argument as she is a damsel in distress. And I don't see it. I don't feel like she is. So I would love to hear from those of you who do feel like she's a damsel in distress. Why do you think that? Why do you think she's a weak character? Is it because of what I already pointed out, that it's more of a fault of the developers and that we don't actually get to play as her and we don't actually get involved in her side of the story? Or do you truly believe, like, even with all of these things about her personality and all of these points that I've made about how she's been presented across different games, you just feel like those things don't salvage how the game does present her and who she is as a person? So yeah, I apologize. I know this is kind of like a mishmash and it's all over the place, but again, excuse me, I'm sick. And you know what, I like for vlogs like this, I don't really plan them out and I don't enjoy scripting them as much because I want it to be more conversational, and I really do want to express my thoughts like raw and unrehearsed, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on this as well. So please let me know in the comments down below, you guys, whether or not, one, do you think Zelda is a damsel in distress? And two, if yes you do, please explain why. If no you don't, I'd love to hear your reasons behind it too. And if they're similar to mine, if they're different from mine, because I'm just interested in hearing what the majority of gamers, especially ones who maybe are more well-versed in the Legend of Zelda series than I am, just what you guys think in general about her and how she fits into the world and into the whole franchise in general. Alright guys, well that is it from me. I'm going to sign off with you right now. Thank you so much for watching. I really look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments section, and I will be in touch with you guys soon. Bye!